Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at a scenario that honestly sounds like it was ripped straight out of a post-apocalyptic thriller, but I assure you it is absolutely real. We're investigating an American town where the ground literally boils, a place where basement walls grew burning hot to the touch, and where a thriving, tight-knit community was just hollowed out by a subterranean nightmare. Let's dive into the eternal furnace of Centralia. Imagine a town where the earth beneath your feet is boiling. It's wild to think about, right? Because on the surface, this place was your picture-perfect 1950s suburb. You know, kids playing in the streets, bustling neighborhoods, the whole shebang. But beneath all that, a fiery, invisible monster was ignited 60 years ago, and it eventually swallowed the entire town from the inside out. So, to figure out how an entire town just gets erased, we're going to follow the timeline chronologically. We'll start with the initial landfill spark in 1962, move into the silent subterranean escalation of the 70s, hit the devastating sinkhole collapse in 1981, and finally look at the town's official condemnation in 1992. Okay, part 1. The setup. The Mammoth Vein. Back in the early 1960s, Centralia was a really tight-knit mining borough. We're talking over 1,000 residents. But here is the absolutely crucial detail. It wasn't just built anywhere. It sat directly on top of what's called the Mammoth Vein. This is one of the richest, most incredibly interconnected deposits of highly combustible anthracite coal in the whole world. It's essentially a giant underground labyrinth. And while this gold mine of black rock was the very thing that gave the town life, it was exactly this geology that would ultimately seal its doom. Which brings us to part 2, the fatal spark, May 1962. The exact scientific chain reaction here is just mind-blowing. It started right before the town's Memorial Day parade. The local council wanted to tidy up the town landfill, and their solution was pretty standard for the time. They just set the trash on fire. But, and this is a massive but, the landfill happened to be right next to an unsealed opening to one of those abandoned coal mines. So the fire didn't stay in the trash. Burning embers slipped down into the dark, hit the coal, and boom, the Mammoth Vein ignites. Because the earth there is so porous, it acted like a giant lung, just sucking in endless oxygen to feed those flames. The chemistry here is completely unforgiving. You take anthracite coal, combine it with an endless supply of subterranean oxygen, and you get an unextinguishable underground furnace. It's a real nightmare. Once this highly combustible type of coal actually catches fire in a porous environment, putting it out becomes basically physically impossible. Without even realizing it, the town council had unwittingly lit an eternal flame right under their own living rooms. Let's move on to part 3, the invisible monster, the 1970s. For years, people just went about their daily lives, completely oblivious to the fact that a massive furnace was expanding right under their feet. But by the late 70s, the environment started fighting back. Get this, a local gas station owner went to check his underground fuel tanks with a dipstick, and he found that his stored gasoline was sitting at a staggering 172 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, that is explosive heat. This invisible fire was baking the earth to incredibly dangerous temperatures. And that takes us to part 4, the breaking point, 1981. 150 feet. That's a terrifying drop, and it completely shattered any remaining illusion of safety in Centralia. In 1981, a 12-year-old kid named Todd Domboski was just walking through his own backyard when the ground literally dissolved right under him. Out of nowhere, a boiling sinkhole opened up, plunging 150 feet deep into the burning earth. And Todd fell right in. And you know, the fall wasn't even the deadliest part. The sinkhole was actively venting lethal carbon monoxide straight from the coal fire below. It's an odorless, invisible, and completely deadly gas, and it nearly cost Todd his life right then and there. The chemistry of the soil had just become utterly toxic. Miraculously, and I mean, what are the odds? Todd grabbed onto a tree root and just held on for dear life against the blistering heat and toxic fumes until his cousin pulled him out. It was a massive wake-up call. Centralia wasn't just hot, it was hollow, and it was burning alive. Part 5, the government exodus, a failed intervention. Now, you might be wondering, why couldn't modern engineering just put this out? Well, the government definitely tried. They dug massive trenches trying to cut off the fire's path. They pumped in millions of gallons of wet slurry to try and smother it, but every single effort failed. The fire was just too deep and spread way too far. Remember that porous earth? It just kept acting like a giant chimney, constantly feeding fresh oxygen into the Mammoth Vein. At the end of the day, the sheer scale and science of this disaster completely outmatched our best engineering. $42 million. That's what it took for the United States Congress to essentially throw their hands up and admit defeat in 1984. They allocated over 42 million bucks, but not to fight the fire. No, it was to surrender to it. They used those funds to systematically relocate the residents. Slowly but surely, house by house, block by block, the entire community of Centralia was demolished. And that brings us to the grim administrative finality of it all. In 1992, the state claimed eminent domain and condemned the entire town. They even permanently revoked Centralia's zip code. Really think about what that means for a second. An entire community of over 1,000 people was just physically and administratively erased from the map. It's chilling. Which leads us to part 6, the aftermath, a modern ghost town. Fast forward to today, and modern Centralia is literally a ghost town. It's just a grid of empty, forest-covered streets where neighborhoods used to be, with only a tiny handful of stubborn holdouts refusing to leave. If you walk along the abandoned Route 61, which a lot of people call the graffiti highway, you can still see smoke leaking out from cracks in the pavement. But here is the most terrifying scientific projection of the whole story. Experts calculate that there is enough anthracite coal still sitting beneath that mountain to keep the fire burning for another 200 years. 2 entire centuries. So I'll leave you with this final thought. What happens when a community's greatest wealth actually becomes its ultimate curse? Centralia was built entirely on the massive riches of the Mammoth Vein, but that exact same geology is what doomed it. The homes are gone, the people are scattered, but down there, beneath the quiet, overgrown forest, the ground is still burning. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep digging into the facts, and I'll catch you next time as we unpack another incredible topic.